The desert sun hung low, casting long shadows across the cracked asphalt of Route 17, where the air shimmered with heat and the faint scent of sagebrush. It was one of those forgotten stretches of highway, miles from the nearest town, where tumbleweeds rolled like ghosts, and the only witnesses were the buzzards circling overhead. That's when they saw him, a small boy, no more than 8, stumbling along the shoulder, his sneakers kicking up dust. His face was streaked with dirt and tears, clothes torn at the edges, carrying the weight of something far too heavy for his fragile frame. He wasn't just lost. The way he glanced back over his shoulder, eyes wide with terror, spoke of shadows chasing him, of a home that had turned into a nightmare. Ethan Ridge. Harlan throttled down on his Harley, the engine's deep rumble cutting through the silence like a warning growl. He was a man built from the scars of old wars. Broad shoulders etched with tattoos of forgotten battles, a jaw set like weathered granite, and eyes that had seen too much betrayal to trust easily. At 42, Ridge rode with the Iron Vipers, a crew of outcasts who'd sworn loyalty to each other after the world had chewed them up and spat them out. He'd lost his brother in a desert skirmish years back, a promise whispered in the sand to watch over the living ones that he'd buried under layers of leather and mileage. But something about this kid tugged at that old vow, pulling him to the side of the road before he even realized it. The boy froze as Ridge's bike came to a halt, the kickstand scraping against the gravel. He didn't run toward the stranger. Instead, he kept his distance, clutching a crumpled backpack like a lifeline, his breaths coming in sharp, ragged bursts. Ridge killed the engine, the sudden quiet amplifying the boy's whimpers and the distant howl of wind through the canyons. He swung his leg over the saddle, boots hitting the ground with a thud that echoed his own guarded heart. "Hey, kid," Ridge said, voice low and steady, like the rumble of thunder on the horizon. "You all right? Looks like you've been through the ringer." The boy didn't answer at first. He backed up a step, but his eyes, dark and pleading, locked onto Ridge's. There was a desperation there, a silent plea that pierced through the biker's armor. Ridge knelt slowly, keeping his hands visible, palms up, the way he'd learned to approach the frightened in his days patrolling war-torn streets. The sun glinted off his rings, silver reminders of oaths taken and broken. Up close, the kid's arms bore faint bruises, shadows of rough hands that had no place marking a child. No words needed. The signs screamed of neglect, of a world that had failed him long before this lonely road. "I'm not going to hurt you," Ridge murmured, pulling a water bottle from his saddlebag. The plastic crinkled in the dry air as he offered it. "Name's Ridge. What's yours?" The boy hesitated, then took a tentative sip, water dribbling down his chin. "Tommy," he whispered finally, voice cracking like dry earth. They said I couldn't come back, but I don't have nowhere else." Tommy's gaze darted to the horizon, as if expecting pursuit, and Ridge felt a chill despite the heat, an echo of his own childhood, abandoned after his folks' crash, left to fend in foster shadows until the streets claimed him. Ridge's mind raced back, unbidden, to that night under a similar sky. His brother Jake had pulled him from the wreckage of their lives, promising, "We'll ride together, kid. No one left behind." Jake had died keeping that word, shielding a squad in a hail of fire, leaving Ridge with a dog tag and a hollow chest. He joined the Vipers to fill that void, forging a family from grease and chrome. But promises like Jake's had a way of resurfacing, demanding payment. This boy, with his haunted eyes, was stirring that dust. "Climb on," Ridge said, nodding to the bike. It wasn't a question. The road ahead was no place for a lone child. Tommy's small hands trembled as he reached out, and when Ridge lifted him onto the passenger seat, the weight felt like fate settling in. The engine roared back to life, vibrating through them both, and as they pulled away, Tommy's arms wrapped around Ridge's waist, not out of fear, but something deeper, a spark of trust igniting in the void. They rode into the fading light, the highway blurring into streaks of gold and purple. Ridge's thoughts churned like the miles behind them. He'd stopped for gas in a nowhere town earlier, mind on the Viper's next run when he'd spotted the kid trailing him from the shadows of a run-down diner. At first, Ridge thought it was curiosity, a street rat eyeing the shine of his bike. But Tommy had kept pace, weaving through parked trucks, refusing to be shaken. By the time Ridge hit the open road, the boy was still there, jogging desperately, until exhaustion forced the confrontation. Now, with the wind whipping their faces, Tommy's voice piped up over the roar. You look like my uncle used to, before he left." Ridge glanced in the side mirror, catching the boy's reflection, small against the vastness. "Uncle, huh? What happened to him?" Tommy buried his face against Ridge's back. "He promised he'd come back for me. Said we'd ride away together, but he never did." The words hung heavy, mirroring Ridge's own ghosts. Promises, damn them for their pull. As dusk deepened, they approached the neon glow of Eldridge Junction, a speck of civilization with a flickering motel sign and the aroma of fry grease wafting from a roadside joint. Ridge eased off the throttle, pulling into the lot where a few rigs idled like weary beasts. He could feel Tommy's grip tighten, the boy sensing the pause as a crossroads. "We ain't staying long," Ridge said, dismounting. "Just need to figure your next move." But deep down, he knew there was no simple path. The Vipers had a code. Protect your own, and this kid was starting to feel like kin. Inside the diner, the jukebox hummed a low country tune, plates clattering under fluorescent lights that buzzed like angry hornets. Ridge ordered burgers and cokes, sliding into a booth where the vinyl cracked under their weight. Tommy devoured his food, but his eyes kept flicking to the window as if the darkness outside held claws. "Those people back there," he said between bites, "they weren't family, not like what you got." Ridge raised an eyebrow, the steam from his coffee curling like smoke signals. "What makes you say that?" Tommy pointed vaguely at Ridge's vest, the iron Viper's patch gleaming, a serpent coiled around a shield. "I seen groups like yours. They stick together. My uncle said that's what real promises look like." Ridge's throat tightened. The boy had no idea how right he was, or how wrong. The Vipers weren't saints. They'd spilled blood for loyalty, dodged badges that bent to corruption. But for a kid like this, broken by the same system that had orphaned Ridge, it might be enough. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, promising rain that would turn the desert to mud. Ridge paid the bill. But as they stepped into the cooling night, a pair of headlights pierced the gloom, slow, deliberate, crawling from the direction they'd come. Tommy froze, his hand slipping into Ridge's. "They're here," the boy whispered, terror etching his young face. Ridge's instincts flared, hand instinctively brushing the knife at his belt. Whoever was hunting this child, they'd just crossed into Viper territory. In that moment, under the motel's flickering sign, Ridge made his vow. Not to the crew, not to the road, but to the wide-eyed trust clinging to him. Jake's promise echoed, no one left behind. And as the vehicle drew nearer, engine purring with menace, Ridge knew this ride had only just begun. The headlights sliced through the night like accusatory fingers, growing brighter as the black SUV prowled into the diner's gravel lot. Its tires crunched slowly, deliberately, as if savoring the approach, the engine's low hum underscoring the tension that coiled in Ridge's gut. He positioned himself between Tommy and the vehicle, one hand on the boy's shoulder, the other hovering near his belt, not drawing, but ready. The air thickened with the scent of impending rain, ozone mixing with the greasy haze from the diner vents. Tommy's small frame trembled against him, breaths shallow and quick, like a cornered animal sensing the trap snap shut. The SUV halted 10 feet away, doors creaking open with a metallic groan that echoed off the motel's peeling facade. Two men emerged, silhouettes first, broad, clad in dark jackets that whispered of authority gone sour. The driver was taller, his face shadowed under a ball cap, but the passenger stepped into the neon spill, revealing a badge glinting on his belt like a false promise. "Not quite cops," Ridge noted. "Their stance is too aggressive, eyes too hungry. Private security maybe, or worse, enforcers for whatever shadows had spat Tommy onto the road." "You the one with the kid?" the passenger barked, voice gravelly, laced with false casualness. He scanned Ridge's vest, the iron viper's patch catching the light, and his lip curled in disdain. "Hand him over, family matter, no need for trouble." Ridge didn't budge, his stance a wall of unyielding leather and resolve. The word family twisted in his chest like a dull blade, ironic, coming from men whose eyes held no warmth, only possession. Tommy pressed closer, whispering, "Don't let them take me back, please." Ridge squeezed the boy's shoulder gently, a silent anchor in the storm brewing. Memories flickered. Jake's hand on his own, years ago, pulling him from the foster system's cold grip. "Family don't drag you into hell," Jake had said. "They pull you out." "Not happening," Ridge replied, voice even, carrying the weight of roads traveled and lines drawn. "Kid's with me now. You got a problem, take it up with the wind." The taller man shifted, hand dipping toward his jacket, but Ridge's gaze locked on him. Steady, unblinking, the kind of look that had stared down sandstorms and ambushes. The air hummed with unspoken threats, the distant thunder rolling closer, mirroring the pulse in Ridge's veins. The passenger smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You don't know what you're meddling in, biker. This ain't your league." He glanced at Tommy, who shrank further, and for a split second Ridge saw the flicker of something ugly. Control, not concern. Boys got places to be, people waiting. Tommy's voice broke through, small but fierce. "They're liars. They hurt Uncle Ray, said he'd never come for me." The words hung in the charged silence, and Ridge felt the pieces shift. Uncle Ray. The man from Tommy's earlier whisper, the one who'd promised escape on the wind. Ridge's mind raced. Had the boy been trailing him because of the bike, the vest, some echo of that lost guardian? The realization hit like exhaust backdraft, stirring the embers of his own buried oath. Before Ridge could press, the passenger lunged forward, grabbing for Tommy's arm. Instinct surged. Ridge shoved the man back with a forearm like iron, the impact thudding dully, sending him stumbling into the gravel. No fists, no blood, just enough force to reset the boundary. The taller one advanced, but headlights flared from the highway. Another vehicle, this one a rumbling pickup with viper colors peeking through the dust. It was Jax, Ridge's second-in-command, who'd been trailing on a supply run. The truck skidded to a halt, Jax leaping out, his presence a ripple of solidarity, the crew's unspoken code manifesting in flesh and chrome. "Back off," Jax growled, positioning himself at Ridge's flank, his own build a mirror of hard miles and harder choices. The enforcers hesitated, outnumbered now, the rain starting to patter on the lot like hesitant applause. "Whatever this is, it ends here." The passenger spat on the ground, eyes narrowing. "This ain't over. You vipers think you own the road? We'll see about that." They retreated to the SUV, engines revving as they peeled out, taillights fading into the storm-swept dark. The rain intensified, drumming on the motel's roof, washing the tension, but not the undercurrent of pursuit. Ridge exhaled, the weight of the moment settling like wet leather. He turned to Tommy, kneeling to meet his gaze. "You safe for now, kid, but we gotta talk." Jax nodded toward the diner, where the lights beckoned like a fragile haven. Inside, over fresh coffees steaming against the chill, Tommy spilled fragments. His uncle, Ray, a former viper who'd gone straight after the war, promising to pull Tommy from a home riddled with neglect. Ray had vanished months ago, whispers of debts to the wrong crowd, leaving Tommy to fend in the cracks. But why Ridge? "Your patch," Tommy said, tracing the serpent with a finger. "Uncle wore one like it. Said if I ever saw it on the road, follow it. It'd lead to help." The words cracked something in Ridge, a fault line from his past. Ray Harlan, his cousin lost to a bad run years back, presumed gone after a deal soured with corrupt badges. The family tie, buried under time and grief, resurfaced like a ghost in the rain. Ridge's eyes stung, not from the weather, but from the promise Ray had carried, now echoed in this boy's trust. Jake's vow intertwined with it. No one left behind. He'd failed Ray once. He wouldn't fail this echo. Jax leaned in, voice low. "Crew's mobilizing. If they're after the kid, they're after old ghosts. We ride at dawn. Full escort to the safe house up north." Ridge nodded, the decision solidifying. The Vipers weren't just riders, they were keepers of oaths, a chosen kin forged in fire and fidelity. As the storm raged outside, Tommy finally slept in the booth, head on Ridge's arm, the diner clock ticking toward midnight. Ridge stared into his coffee, the black surface rippling with reflections of what was to come. Pursuit loomed, corruption's tendrils reaching for the innocent. But in this fragile peace, a new bond formed, silent, profound, the kind that redeems the scarred soul. The road ahead promised trials, but for the first time in years, Ridge felt the pull of purpose, the honor of a promise renewed. Dawn would break with engines roaring, 47 strong, ready to shield what mattered. But for now, in the hush of rain-lashed windows, Ridge allowed himself a moment's vulnerability. A tear traced down his weathered cheek, unseen, for the boy who'd followed him into the light. The rain had softened to a misty veil by the time the first hints of dawn crept over the jagged horizon, painting the desert in bruised purples and golds. Ridge stood outside the diner, steam rising from his coffee mug as he watched the Viper convoy assemble in the lot, 47 bikes in total, a thunderous phalanx of chrome and loyalty, engines idling like patient beasts. Jax had called in the crew overnight, riders converging from dusty backroads and forgotten outposts, drawn by the unspoken code that bound them. No questions asked. When one Viper needed the pack, they came. The air hummed with the low growl of exhaust, mingled with the sharp tang of wet earth and oiled metal, a symphony of solidarity under the clearing sky. Tommy huddled in the warmth of the pickup's cab, blanket draped over his shoulders, his small face pressed to the window. Sleep had claimed him briefly, but now his eyes were wide, tracing the silhouettes of the riders as they strapped gear and shared nods of grim purpose. Ridge caught his gaze through the glass, offering a reassuring thumbs up that masked the storm inside him. Ray, his cousin, blood and brother in arms, vanished into the shadows of a botched deal. The pieces Tommy had shared in the diner's dim light painted a picture of desperation. Ray pulling strings to get clean, to build a life away from the club's fringes, only to tangle with men who twisted the law into knots for profit. He said the Vipers would always have his back, Tommy had murmured, voice thick with exhaustion. Even if he walked away. Ridge's chest tightened at the memory, the weight of that old fracture resurfacing. He'd blamed himself for years, for not fighting harder when Ray chose the straight path, for letting the distance grow until silence swallowed them. Jake's death had hardened him, turned promises into armor rather than lifelines, but this boy, with his unyielding faith in a ghost's word, was chipping away at the rust. He swung onto his Harley, the familiar creak of leather settling like an old friend's embrace, and glanced at Jax, who mounted up beside him. "Safe house in Blackridge Canyon," Jax said, voice cutting through the rumble. 2 hours if we push. Keep eyes sharp. Those shadows from last night won't fade easy. The convoy surged forward as one, a rolling wave of thunder that shook the motel's windows and scattered gravel like fleeing doubts. Tommy rode with Jax in the truck, the boy waving tentatively from the passenger seat as Ridge led the pack onto the highway. The road unfurled before them, slick with residual rain, flanked by canyons that whispered of hidden perils, twisting paths where ambushes could bloom from the rocks. Wind whipped at their faces, carrying the faint, acrid bite of sage and distant wildfires, a reminder that the desert held grudges longer than men. Ridge's mind replayed the enforcers' faces, their badges a mockery of justice, likely tied to the same corrupt web that had snared Ray. Whispers in viper circles spoke of a ring preying on the vulnerable, foster homes turned cages, debts enforced with fists hidden behind paperwork. Tommy's bruises were just the visible scars. The real wounds ran deeper, etched in broken trusts. Miles blurred into a hypnotic rhythm, the pack weaving through sparse traffic like shadows in pursuit of light. Up ahead, a checkpoint loomed, an official barricade, flares glowing orange against the asphalt, manned by state troopers whose cruisers sat squat and watchful. Ridge signaled a slowdown, the convoy compressing into a disciplined line, engines purring down to a respectful growl. His pulse quickened. Badges like these could be straight, or they could be bought, and the line between ally and adversary blurred in places like this. As they approached, a trooper stepped forward, hand raised, his uniform crisp under the rising sun. "Licenses and registration," he demanded, eyes scanning the Vipers with the wariness of a man who'd seen too many headlines about outlaw runs. Ridge killed his engine, dismounting with deliberate calm, the ground still warm from the night's chill. He handed over his papers, keeping his posture open, non-threatening, the viper way when facing the thin blue line. "Just passing through, officer. Heading north on personal business." The trooper's gaze flicked to the truck, where Tommy peered out, then back to Ridge's vest. Recognition dawned, mingled with suspicion. "Iron Vipers. Heard you boys keep to yourselves. What's the rush?" Before Ridge could answer, static crackled from the trooper's radio, a dispatcher's voice slicing the morning air, urgent and coded. The man's face tightened, and he stepped aside, waving them through with a curt nod. "Clear, but watch your backs. Road's got eyes today." As the convoy accelerated past, Ridge caught a glimpse in his mirror. Another vehicle idling just beyond the flares, unmarked, its driver obscured by tinted glass. The enforcers or their ilk circling like vultures. A chill traced his spine, not from the wind, but from the ethical snare tightening. These weren't random hunters, they were institutional rot, the kind that dressed coercion in legal cloth, preying on the voiceless to line pockets. The canyons deepened as they pushed on, walls rising like ancient sentinels, echoing the roar of the bikes with hollow defiance. Tommy's story unfolded in fragments over the radio. Ray had worked odd jobs after leaving the club, a mechanic's hands stained with grease instead of gun oil, saving every cent to buy Tommy's freedom from a system that labeled him troubled. But debts from Ray's past had caught up, enforcers demanding payment in silence, vanishing him when he refused to bend. "He gave me this." Tommy's voice crackled through, describing a small token, a Viper keychain worn and warm from his pocket. "Said if I lost everything, find the road and follow the roar. It'd bring me home." Ridge's grip tightened on the handlebars, tears blurring the horizon for a heartbeat. Home, not a place, but the promise of it, woven from loyalty's thread. He'd broken down in that diner last night, unseen, the boy's words unlocking the vault where he'd stored his failures. Ray hadn't just walked away, he'd carried the family's honor forward, entrusting it to this child. Now, with 47 souls riding shield, Ridge felt the redemption stir, a quiet fire burning away the isolation. But the radio buzzed again, Jax's tone edged with warning. "Tail on us, 2 miles back, black SUV, same as before. They're closing." The pack tightened formation, engines surging as the chase ignited. Bullets weren't flying yet, but the air thickened with intent, the moral crossroads sharpening. Ridge glanced skyward, where the sun climbed relentless, casting their shadows long and united. For Tommy, for Ray, for the vow Jake had etched in his soul: no one left behind. The canyon narrowed ahead, a bottleneck ripe for confrontation, and Ridge knew the true test loomed. Not in speed or steel, but in the unyielding stand against corruption's tide. As the SUV's growl grew audible, echoing off the rocks, he throttled harder, the wind carrying his silent oath into the fray. The canyon walls closed in like the jaws of some ancient beast, sheer rock faces scarred by wind and time, funneling the Viper convoy into a narrow vein of the desert's heart. The roar of 47 engines reverberated off the stone, a defiant chorus that drowned out the pursuing SUV's snarl, but not the tension thrumming through Ridge's veins. He leaned into the curve, his Harley hugging the asphalt's edge, the vibration pulsing up his arms like a second heartbeat. Dust devils swirled in their wake, kicked up by tires gripping the slick remnants of rain, and the air grew heavy with the mineral tang of wet granite and the faint metallic bite of fear sweat under leather. Jax's voice crackled over the radio, steady but edged with gravel. "They're gaining, Ridge. Half a mile and closing. We hit the straightaway soon. Your call on splitting or standing." Ridge's jaw clenched, the wind stinging his eyes as he scanned the mirror. The black SUV bulled through the dust cloud, a predatory shadow weaving aggressively, its tinted windows hiding whatever malice drove it. No sirens, no lights, just raw intent, the kind that bypassed badges and burrowed into the underbelly of justice. Tommy's small voice piped in from the truck, faint but piercing. "They're the ones who took Uncle Ray. Don't let 'em catch us." The words landed like shrapnel, ripping open Ridge's resolve. Ray, his blood, his echo, dragged into oblivion for refusing to feed the beast of corruption that feasted on the weak. Ridge throttled harder, the pack surging as one, a living barrier of chrome and oath-sworn riders fanning out to shield the truck at the core. The canyon straightened into a brutal ribbon of road, flanked by boulders that loomed like silent judges, their surfaces etched with petroglyphs of forgotten warriors. Memories assaulted him, Ray's laugh echoing in a desert outpost, the two of them sharing a flask under starlit skies, promising to bury the war's ghosts together. "Family's what we make, brother," Ray had said, clinking dog tags. But Ridge had let the miles widen the gap, drowning doubt in the club's runs, until Ray's straight path became a whisper lost to the wind. Now this chase was Atonement's forge, hammering his failures into something sharper, a blade of loyalty for the boy who'd followed him like a beacon. A sharp crack split the air, not thunder, but the pop of a tire shredded by unseen debris. Behind them, a Viper bike wobbled, its rider, Marcus, a grizzled vet with shrapnel scars hidden under his sleeves, fighting to stay upright. He signaled all clear, but the delay cost them. The SUV lunged closer, its grille gleaming like bared teeth. Ridge barked into the radio, "Flank and box 'em! No contact! Push 'em off the line!" The pack responded with precision born of shared scars, bikes peeling left and right to hem in the pursuer. Engines howled in unison, a tactical ballet on two wheels, the scent of scorched rubber rising sharp and acrid. Jax swerved the truck wide, Tommy's face a pale blur in the window, clutching the Viper keychain like a talisman. The SUV veered, slamming brakes in a screech that clawed the canyon walls, but not before its side mirror clipped a rider's handlebar. The Viper held, countering with a shoulder check that sent the vehicle fishtailing toward the rock face. Sparks flew as it grazed stone, the impact shuddering through the air like a warning from the earth itself. Ridge felt the moral weight press heavier. This wasn't blind fury, it was justice's quiet thunder standing against men who twisted protection into chains. The enforcers inside, Ridge imagined, were the system's rot incarnate. Guardians turned jailers, profiting from fractured homes, vanishing those who dared expose the cracks. Ray had seen it, fought it, paid for it with his freedom. Tommy, the innocent casualty, now fueled the fire that bound the Vipers tighter, As the straightaway bent into another twist, the SUV recovered, accelerating with desperate menace. Bullets? No, not yet. These hunters preferred subtlety, the slow grind of intimidation over outright war. But Ridge sensed the shift. A radio intercept jacks relayed painted urgency. Dispatch chatter, local PD en route, but bought off. They're calling us the threat. The irony burned, a poetic sting in the ethical maze. The Vipers, outcasts who'd chosen honor over the bottle, now painted as villains, protecting a child from the very authority sworn to shield him. Ridge's mind flashed to Jake's last stand, shielding civilians in a hail of chaos, dying for a promise that echoed here: integrity against the tide. They burst from the canyon's maw into open scrubland, the safe house a distant smudge on the horizon. A weathered ranch tucked against red cliffs. Viper Sanctuary, stocked with supplies and secrets. The pack stretched, pushing limits, the sun climbing to midday blaze, baking the road into a shimmering mirage. Sweat traced paths down Ridge's back, mixing with the grit of the ride. But his focus sharpened on Tommy's relayed words. Uncle said you'd come. The road always brings family back. The boy's faith, pure as desert spring, cracked the last of Ridge's walls. He'd broken down fully now, not in tears, but in surrender to the pull, a redemption woven from loss, mending the frayed threads of his soul. The SUV faltered at last, engine coughing as the Viper's blockade funneled it into a spin-out on the shoulder. Dust billowed like a shroud, and as it ground to a halt, doors flew open. The two enforcers emerged, hands raised in feigned surrender, but their eyes screamed calculation. Ridge signaled a halt, the convoy circling like wolves around prey, engines idling in a low, ominous purr. He dismounted, boots crunching gravel, approaching with Jax at his side. "End of the line," Ridge said, voice carrying the canyon's echo, steady as forged steel. "You touch the kid, you answer to more than badges." The passenger, the same gravel-voiced one from the diner, stepped forward, wiping dust from his jacket, the glint of his false emblem mocking the light. "You're in over your head, Harlan." Ray owed big. Debts that don't forgive. Hand over the boy and maybe we forget this little joyride. The name hit like a gut punch. They knew him, knew Ray's ties. Corruption's web, spun from old Viper dealings twisted into leverage. Tommy's gasp crackled over the radio, and Ridge's hand steadied on his knife. Not for violence, but resolve. Ray's family, so's the kid. Your debts end here. With truth, not chains. Tension hung thick, the scrub wind whispering through creosote bushes, until sirens wailed faintly from the south, real PD perhaps, or more puppets. The enforcers backed toward their vehicle, retreating with curses that dissolved into the heat haze. The convoy reformed, engines roaring triumph, but Ridge knew this was no victory. It was a reprieve, the moral battle far from won. As they rolled toward the safe house, Tommy's truck pulling alongside for a moment, the boy leaned out, keychain raised like a flag. "We're almost home," he called, his voice cutting the wind. Ridge nodded, the weight lifting fractionally, replaced by the honor of the ride. Promises survived in these moments, the silent ones that bound the broken into something unbreakable. But shadows lingered, the corrupt web tightening, and as the ranch gates loomed, Ridge braced for the revelations within. Ray's fate, Tommy's future, his own redemption, all converged in the dust-choked distance. If this story is touching your heart, hit that like button to show your support. The safe house gates creaked open like weary bones under the midday sun, admitting the Viper convoy into a compound ringed by weathered corrals and sun-baked adobe walls. Dust settled slowly in the air, a fine veil that caught the light and danced around the idling engines as riders dismounted, their boots thudding against packed earth still damp from the morning storm. The ranch sprawled in quiet isolation, a sanctuary carved from the desert's unforgiving edge. Windmills creaking lazily, the distant low of cattle mingling with the fading rumble of Harleys. Ridge swung off his bike, the heat radiating from the exhaust warming his calves as he scanned the horizon, instincts still wired from the chase. The enforcer's retreat felt too clean, too temporary, like a predator pulling back to regroup. Tommy clambered down from the truck, his sneakers scuffing the gravel, the Viper keychain clutched tight in his fist like a fragment of hope. Jax clapped a hand on the boy's shoulder, guiding him toward the main house, a low-slung structure with shutters drawn against the glare, its porch sagging under years of secrets. "Inside, kid. Safer than out here." The crew fanned out, some checking perimeters with quiet efficiency, others unloading gear from saddlebags, water, rations, and the unspoken arsenal of loyalty. Ridge lingered by his bike, wiping sweat from his brow with a forearm scarred by old flames, the scent of creosote and horse manure grounding him in this fragile peace. But peace was a lie. The radio chatter from the road still echoed in his ears, a reminder that corruption's reach stretched further than canyon walls. Inside, the air cooled, thick with the aroma of aged wood and faint coffee brewing on a scarred stove. The main room served as command center and hearth, maps pinned to walls yellowed by time, a long table scarred from countless strategy sessions. Tommy sank into a worn armchair, eyes darting to the shadows, while Jax poured him a glass of water that clinked against the rim. Ridge paced, his leather vest creaking softly, until an older Viper, Elena, the crew's medic, a woman with silver-streaked hair and hands steady from battlefield patches, emerged from a back room. "Got something?" she said, voice low, holding a dusty ledger pulled from a hidden safe. "Ray's file. He reached out 6 months back, coded message through an old contact. Said he was clean, working a garage up north, but shadows were closing in. Debts from a deal gone south, tied to some outfit masking as child services." Ridge took the ledger, fingers tracing Ray's familiar scrawl. The ink faded, but the words sharp as a blade. "If I go down, get to Tommy. Promise holds." The room blurred for a moment, Ridge's throat closing around the weight of it. Ray hadn't just vanished, he'd planned, entrusted the boy to the road's whisper, knowing the Viper's code would carry it home. Tommy watched him, small face etched with the same quiet plea that had hooked Ridge on that empty highway. "He wrote about you," the boy said softly, sliding off the chair to stand closer. "Said you were the strongest one, the one who'd never break a word." The innocence in his voice cracked the dam Ridge had built around his grief. Jake's death, Ray's absence, the foster nights alone under flickering streetlights. He knelt, meeting Tommy's gaze, the keychain glinting between them like a shared talisman. "You followed me because of this," Ridge murmured, voice rough as gravel, touching the serpent patch on his vest. Tommy nodded, eyes shining. "Uncle said the roar would lead to family, real family." The words undid him then, not in sobs, but in a quiet unraveling, a tear tracing the dust on his cheek, unseen by the crew, but felt in the tremor of his hands. Redemption wasn't thunderous. It was this, a boy's trust, bridging the chasms of failure. Jax cleared his throat from the doorway, breaking the spell. "Perimeter's clear, but we've got company inbound. Radio picked up chatter. 3 vehicles, unmarked. ETA 20 minutes. They're not backing off." The room snapped to action, the ledger set aside as plans formed in clipped words and nods. Elena ushered Tommy to a back room with a cot and barred window, her voice soothing like a lullaby over the rising tension. "Stay put, little one. We've got this." Outside, the crew mobilized, bikes repositioned for blockade, riders taking posts along the ridge, the sun baking their resolve into steel. Ridge stepped onto the porch, the wooden planks groaning under his weight, wind carrying the faint whine of approaching engines from the south. He could smell the dust they stirred, a dry storm brewing. Jax joined him, rifle slung low, not for use, but presence. They're here for the kid, or Ray's ghost. Either way, we stand. The vehicles crested the rise, a trio of dark sedans kicking up plumes that obscured the cliffs, halting in a semicircle at the gates. Doors opened and figures emerged, 5 in total, clad in nondescript suits that screamed false authority, badges flashing like counterfeit gold. The leader, a wiry man with a clipboard and eyes like chipped flint, approached the fence, his companions fanning out with calculated menace. "Mr. Harlan," he called, voice amplified by the open desert, "we're from Protective Services. The child's welfare is our concern. Step aside, and this ends peacefully." Ridge's laugh was low, bitter, echoing off the adobe. "Welfare? That's what you call snatching kin for old scores?" The man's face tightened, the facade cracking. "Ray Harlan owed us. Interfering makes you accessories." Whispers from the crew rippled behind him. Vipers murmuring confirmations from Elena's intel. This ring, burrowed in institutional folds, traded in coerced silences, vanishing dissenters under veils of paperwork. Tommy's home had been their cage, Ray's resistance their target. The ethical noose tightened, justice's scales tipping toward the voiceless. As the leader gestured to his men, advancing with hands on holsters, Ridge raised a palm, stalling. "Call it off. We know about the ledgers, the payoffs. Ray exposed you. Now we finish it." A radio buzzed in the man's ear, and hesitation flickered. Reinforcements, perhaps, or the unraveling of their web via anonymous tips the Vipers had seeded en route. The standoff stretched, sun beating down, sweat tracing paths under collars until the leader's shoulders slumped fractionally. "This isn't over," he muttered, signaling retreat, vehicles reversing in a cloud of defeat. The gates clanged shut behind them, the crew exhaling as one. But Ridge felt no triumph, only the hollow echo of promises kept at a cost. Inside, Tommy emerged, wrapping arms around Ridge's waist in a hug that sealed the bond. "You did it," like Uncle said. Ridge held him close, the breakdown complete now, washed clean in loyalty's quiet fire. But as dusk painted the cliffs in crimson, a lone rider approached from the north. Exhausted, familiar silhouette on a battered bike. Ray, alive, drawn by the roar that had called him home. The circle closed, family chosen enduring, but the shadow's retreat whispered of trials yet to come. For now, under the vast sky, honor's legacy burned bright. The lone rider crested the northern ridge as the sun dipped low, casting elongated shadows that stretched like fingers across the ranch's dusty yard. His bike, a weathered relic scarred by miles and mishaps, coughed to a halt at the gates, engines sputtering into silence amid the Viper convoy's watchful hush. Dust clung to his frame, outlining a man hollowed by ordeal, Ray Harlan, Ridge's cousin, bloodkin and brother in the fires of youth. His face, gaunt under a week's stubble, bore the marks of confinement, faint shadows under eyes that had stared into too many dark corners, clothes rumpled from hasty escape. But alive, against the whispers of debt and disappearance, he breathed the desert air. Free. Ridge froze on the porch, the ledger slipping from his fingers to thud against the planks. The world narrowed to that silhouette. The creak of the gate swinging open under Ray's push, the faint jingle of keys in his pocket, the same Viper token Tommy clutched. The crew parted like a sea of leather and resolve, murmurs rippling through them as recognition dawned. Jack stepped forward first, clasping Ray's forearm in a grip that spoke volumes without words, while Elena's sharp eyes scanned for wounds, her medic's instincts overriding the moment's awe. Tommy burst from the house, blanket trailing like a cape, his cry slicing the twilight. "Uncle Ray!" He barreled into Ray's legs, small arms wrapping tight, sobs muffled against denim worn thin by trials. Ray knelt, enveloping the boy in a bear hug that trembled with unspoken relief, his hand stroking Tommy's hair as if to confirm the reality. "I told you the road would bring us back," he whispered, voice cracked like parched earth yielding to rain. Ridge approached slowly, boots deliberate on the gravel, each step a bridge over years of silence and self-imposed exile. Their eyes met, mirror images of shared loss, Jake's ghost hovering between them like a benevolent spectre. "Thought you were gone for good," Ridge said, the words rough, laced with the gravel of emotion long buried. Ray rose, pulling him into a clasp that clashed vest against jacket, the scent of sweat and freedom mingling. "Couldn't break the promise. Not to you, not to him." The embrace held, a silent mending of fractures, the vipers circling closer in quiet witness to the family's reunion. Under the porch light's warm glow, spilling onto the yard like spilled honey, they gathered in the main room. The air hummed with the low chatter of crew settling in, cans cracking open, maps rolled away for now. Ray sat at the scarred table, Tommy perched on his knee, recounting the enforcer's web in measured tones. It unraveled like a poorly tied knot, a syndicate burrowed deep in oversight agencies, fabricating debts to control the vulnerable, foster placements turned leverage, dissenters like Ray silenced under threats veiled as procedure. He'd gone straight to shield Tommy, taking a mechanic's wage to buy out the boy's placement. But when he uncovered their ledgers, payoffs to badges kids shuffled for profit, they'd snatched him, staging a disappearance to crush resistance. "I escaped during a transfer," Ray said, fingers tracing the keychain Tommy had passed to him. "Heard the roar from miles away, knew it was you pulling the pack together." Ridge leaned against the wall, arms crossed, the weight of redemption settling like a well-worn jacket. He'd broken down, not in the diner's rain, nor the canyon's fury, but here, in the quiet unraveling of guilt. Jake's vow, Ray's echo, Tommy's faith. They'd forged him anew, stripping the isolation that had armored his heart. "We almost lost you both," he admitted, voice steady now, eyes meeting Ray's with unfiltered honesty. "But the code held. No one left behind." Elena nodded from her corner, bandaging a minor scrape on Marcus's arm from the chase, her presence a thread in the chosen family's tapestry. Jax raised a mug in toast, the crew joining with a rumble of agreement, the room alive with the warmth of bonds reforged. Outside, night deepened, stars pricking the vast canopy like promises etched in ink. Tommy, eyelids heavy, drifted to sleep on the cot. Ray watching over him with a vigil born of survival. The Vipers stood guard in shifts, engines silent but readiness palpable. The desert wind whispering through the corrals. Ridge stepped into the cooling air, Ray joining him at the fence line, the two men silhouetted against the moonlit cliffs. "I walked away thinking I could outrun it," Ray confessed, gaze on the horizon where the road vanished into shadow. "But family pulls you back. You did right by him. By us." Ridge clapped his shoulder, the gesture simple, profound. "We ride together now. Debts paid in truth, not blood." The syndicate's retreat was temporary, their tendrils likely coiling for retaliation, but the Vipers were no strangers to shadows. Tips had been sent anonymously en route. Fragments of Ray's intel to straight-laced contacts, seeds of exposure that would bloom into institutional reckoning. Justice, moral and unyielding, moved not with thunder but persistence, the honor of the road outlasting corruption's grasp. As dawn's first light teased the east, painting the ranch in soft rose, the crew stirred. Bikes would roll soon, escorting Ray and Tommy to a new start. A quiet town up north, Viper eyes watching from afar. Ridge mounted his Harley last, the engine's familiar purr a balm. Tommy waving from Ray's sidecar rig, small face alight with security. The convoy pulled out, 47 strong once more, a thunderous affirmation of loyalty's legacy. In that moment, Ridge felt whole, the scars of loss transmuted into strength, promises not just survived but thriving. The desert stretched endless, but home rode with them, unbreakable. Thank you for joining us on this journey of redemption and unbreakable bonds. If this story moved you, please subscribe for more tales of honor and heart. Hit that button and let's keep the roar alive together.